Hello, everyone. This is Victoria Vesna, and you're tuned in to Vibrations Matter. In this episode, I'm delighted to share my conversation with engineer and vibration artist Alan Macy. Alan and I have been orbiting one another for years, aware of each other's work and moving in overlapping art science circles. But only recently did we meet in person during the Brave New Works exhibition and symposium in Santa Barbara. I found myself in a panel Alan was leading, and it quickly became clear how much common ground we shared around vibration, embodiment, and participation. His practice spans deep technical and creative terrain. Trained as an engineer and working as the R&D director and co-founder of BIOPAC Systems, his foundation lies in biosignal measurement, sensor design, and data acquisition for life science research. In parallel, he directs the Santa Barbara Center for Art, Science, and Technology, supporting interdisciplinary experimentation and mentoring students across art, engineering, and science. During the symposium, Alan invited me to experience one of his many vibration seats, and I enjoyed laying down with headphones, listening to the voice, and feeling frequencies being translated directly into my body. I also witnessed the works in progress by UCSB graduate students where his generosity stood out. Their nascent ideas were paired with real tools and technical support. In parallel to his professional work and research, Alan often works collaboratively with artists, exploring embodied sound, and he creates solo projects as well. One such that stood out for me was Plume Cathedra, a chair with feathered wings that gently open and close with the participant's breath, creating a subtle feedback loop between body, air, and gravity. Alan's work bridges engineering precision with poetic restraint, reminding us that vibration is not just something we hear, it's something we inhabit. I'm sure you'll enjoy this conversation as much as I did. I am really excited to talk to you and to get to know a little more about your trajectory. I'm very interested how you started thinking the way you think and to go into the bioenergetic and the vibration projects that you're doing. As I was laying on one of your chairs, I was thinking, how did he get to this place?
How did that happen?
How did that happen? Can you rewind all the way back to when you were a kid and just how one thing led to another and where you had your aha moments and started
Uh,
creating these wild projects?
okay, sure. Yeah, I'll try. So I grew up. I was like a trumpet player
Uh,
when I was growing up, and so it was a kind of and I stopped playing after high school, but then some years later I picked up the didgeridoo, and so I that's a
oh,
uh, uh, um, and I was reminded of it. Uh, I mean, I got into it because there was a fellow who was like from Montreal, and he was like that kind of busker in Santa Barbara, like in front of the mall, and he had like all these didgeridoos laid out, and he made some from scratch. And I'm going to show you one. Okay,
yeah, do.
he calls it the blue one,
Aha.
and pretty long. I think it's a D, and it's got all these like
Is that
engraved.
the very one that you got, that you bought the first
Uh-huh.
time?
Yeah, back I don't know, it's like I don't even know, 30 years old or something now or something like that. It's actually two pieces of wood that are glued together, so it's not a traditional
Uh-huh.
didgeridoo that's ringed out of the eucalyptus, but nevertheless, kind of got me sort of focused on that again, and I always loved the feeling, of how it felt, playing it. And it's like two sets of vocal cords. It's this one here, and it's also your lips become a kind of vocal cords.
But
for
wait, you made a huge jump from the trumpet to the didgeridoo.
yeah, yeah, it was big. Yeah, it was big. I guess felt big. And I'm
So,
I'm pretty crappy at it really because I'm not a circular breather or anything. Like I can't do that. But I have one song that has been part of a medley of songs by a lady that does it's like a meditation teacher. So I have
uh-huh.
like just one that made it to like I don't know, publishing or something. And anyway, um, I do like that. I like that instrument, but I've kind of always been into music. So I just my so kind of turned on to it from my seventh grade English teacher, English music teacher,
Is
and
that right? English
mhm.
music
And
teacher.
so it was like composition, music composition, and then the way that you were determined if there were three prize winners in seventh grade music class, and one of them was if you were first, you got to pick out a 33 and go to the local record store. He'd buy it for you, like whatever 33 you wanted, LP.
Oh,
And then second and third places were 45.
45.
45s, yeah. And then so I was second place winner. And then the way it was determined is that he'd play it on his piano, what your composition was that you created, you brought in. He'd play it on the piano, and then if the class clapped more or less for it, then he would determine if that was like the clapping was suitable for first, second, or third. And so yeah, I'm into that. I'm into
So which 45 did you buy?
I bought Penny Lane, uh,
Ah,
and it was the
interesting.
flip side was Strawberry Fields Forever.
Wow. What
Yeah.
year was that?
See, that would have been let's see, seventh grade, so I would have been let's see, that 12, and so that would have been 1970.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And that's when so much experimental music was starting to
Hmm.
happen that you probably weren't even aware of, too young.
Yeah, I was
But
a little young, but I had two older siblings. My brother's 3 years older, and my sister's almost 5 years older. And
uh-huh,
so, I got exposed to a lot of their music.
I see.
And then, so yeah, there was this kind of Cambrian explosion of rock and roll that
Yes.
happened. And my first year in college, I had a roommate. His name was Tarang, and it means he's from India, and it means when you throw the rock in water, the
Uh-huh.
ripples that happen when you
Oh
throw the rock.
wow. How
And
beautiful is that?
and so he designed his own stereo equipment, and we were both in electronics engineering,
Oh,
and so I got exposed to like he designed his own speakers and his own amplifiers, which was like to me was sort of astonishing that someone could do that, like at
yeah.
17 or something. And so um, and that was the first time I really heard like bass music. Like we had a console, like one of the ones that like you would get like it was my dad was an architect, and so it fit perfectly, and it complemented. It was like a lovely piece of furniture. But I don't, it was I think it was the only sound system we had, and had room for like your records and your whatnot, and then but I don't think it really produced anything below like 90 hertz or 100 hertz or something. And so I didn't really know that. And certainly all the speakers, the transistor radios or whatever, like none of them could produce. And so it was like the first time I had heard like actual like a, like I'd been to a concert and so was aware of it, but like
Right.
coming out of like your dorm room speakers is
Wow, yeah.
unprecedented. And so, yeah, that was a big aha moment. It's like, wow, there's like whole octaves of music, down there. And then, so yeah, that kind of happened. And then at the same time that was going on, this kind of like interest in music and, of course, a lot of concerts and, it was a lot of time to like experimentation with like, psychedelic substances and that kind of thing, that normal stuff that happens in college. And,
Especially
the
at that time.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was just like everywhere you looked. And so I got a job working for an experimental psychologist. So I was just turned 20, I think, right around there. So I was third year, or maybe I was 19. Like it's like yeah, anyway, around 20.
Where
And
was
that
this? Which university were you at?
I was at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo,
Oh, okay.
and so I was in the final year there, and so I got this job working, and it was 20 miles up the road at the state hospital, which was a hospital for the you're interned for being uh, definitely criminal, because it's a prison, but then it was a hospital. So the presumption was there was something like wrong with you, uh, and that maybe could be fixed, or at least that was kind of part of the idea. And I worked in this laboratory that was a behavior modification laboratory.
Oh, wow.
And so it was back when the state was doing this stuff, which was the late
Wow.
70s. And, it was I don't even, yeah, but there was money in it. And it was very expensive to house somebody at a Tuscarora State Hospital. And I don't know, 200,000 back then, even 200,000 a year or something to
Oh
have
my
so it was
God.
highly incentivized to figure out how to get people out of there. Like,
Yes.
and so they
Yes.
they had funding to do this, and so it was a total Clockwork Orange thing, uh, and it was uh, olfact. They used techniques, classical conditioning techniques, and they'd
Uh-huh.
expose the clients to to stimuli that was considered deviant stimuli, and then they would look at physiological responses from the clients, and then determine whether or not it was time for them to break open an ammonia capsule and inhale it, and then pair the noxious uh, uh, olfactory agent to the deviant stimuli and classically condition them to. That was the thought, and then there were all kinds of variations on that theme, like um, covert desensitization, where it was a kind of fantasy retelling story stuff. Uh, and But a lot of things of that ilk. And it was like soup. I was like a tech, and so like my job was to keep the equipment working, like the slide projectors working, like the measurement equipment. So I learned about strip chart recorders and how they worked, and the little needles, and the signals that would propagate, the nature of the amplifiers and the filters and stuff, and like what was actually being pulled off the person. And I was in engineering school, so it was hugely influential, for me. So. Uh,
So were they using also frequencies and sounds and was it visual? It was more, I'm just curious
It was
what
almost all visual, and then
interesting.
towards the latter part of my time there, it became a visual and auditory. But it was always about storytelling, and so
Aha.
there were stories that were deemed acceptable, and then there were stories that were deemed not acceptable.
Interesting.
And then
Wow.
the idea was that you would, and I don't know. And there were a whole stream of like psychology students coming in there. So it's very interesting to kind of see their world too. They were my age, but also coming, like not engineering, it's like more psychology. So that was fascinating too. And uh, so
Amazing. So they were basically reprogramming people,
mhm.
right?
They
At
were trying
least
to,
they were
yeah.
trying to, I was going to say.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see any success or how were you experiencing watching that and being around it, even
Well,
with,
you would meet the clients, and they would tell you stories about what was going on with them. And but I kind of it became abundantly clear that the kind of number basically everyone had like a pretty fucked up childhood. Like that was just how it was. Like there were pretty much no exceptions. It was all like bad
yeah,
childhood stuff. So um, which made in at the time it did make sense to me because my mom was a social worker, and so kind of learned a little bit about that, like upbringing and how
right,
that sort of
right.
ripples into adulthood and stuff. So um,
Interesting.
yeah. Um, so so I ultimately I left that job because I got accepted to graduate school at UCSB. And then they didn't have a biomedical engineering program, but they had a concentration in it. And so I kept up with that, like learned some uh, more theoretical basis for like modeling physiology and stuff. And then I got introduced to this idea of the nature of the rhythm systems in the body and how they're organized. And in a kind of I'm not sure if we discussed this over lunch. I don't remember exactly, but um, it became clear that there was a kind of increasingly clear. And then also, at the same time, I mean, after I graduated from college, I started a company called BIOPAC Systems, and I'm still there. I work as a research and development director, but I've done like like I don't even know, tens of thousands of recordings off of people, like different kinds of signals from the body. So like from the eyes, and then from the all the muscles, and you know movements of fingers, or the breathing, like or the heart, the movement, the electrical contractions of the heart, or the peristaltic contractions of the stomach. I mean, all these things, like pretty, like I don't know, thousands, tens, many tens, hundreds of thousands of recordings. And so you kind of get like, after you look at enough of these, you go, wow, there's that, there's that, that.
So
And then you start to
you could see patterns. You started picking.
totally, and it was all about pattern finding. And when you put physiological data in a on strip chart recorder, it makes like waves, like it does
Mm-hmm.
the paper's moving, and so it makes like that pattern or that pattern, or any one of a number of different patterns, and then you see, oh, that pattern also exists in this other thing, but it's at a different frequency. Or and then people, of course, your people are really good at that. People are really good at pattern detection. Like that's a gift we have. And so a strip chart recorder is a really good way to interpret physiology. It still continues to be probably the best way, at least for initial investigations. And then once you have had a chance to sort of digest it that way, then you can apply advanced mathematical tools to further reduce it to actionable vectors or whatever. But at the outset, there's nothing like seeing it to get a sense of like what's going on. And uh, so uh, so that's what the whole company was based on. BioPac was based on that idea, but it was transferring it. Instead of being a strip chart recorder, it was organized around the first Macintosh computer, which was set up for graphics because it had a megapixel screen. And so when you drew on it, it looked like an actual waveform versus a blocky, crappy thing, because all the other computers were 300 by 200 resolution, and you couldn't draw picture like that. Like a waveform would look weird. And on the Macintosh, it didn't look weird. It looked on a strip chart recorder. And so we were able to start moving these systems to academics, and then we got pulled kind of, and we always started it with a little bit of a life science emphasis, and it just continued to grow. So anyway, back to the
So wait, was that your doctoral thesis?
no, I didn't do a doctorate. That was
You
I
did a
stopped after a
master's?
master's degree, and
But that
then
was your master's thesis then?
no, my
No.
master's thesis was a continuation of work I'd done at Cal Poly, which was voice recognition. Uh,
Aha.
so kind of
Okay.
like, and so then that's all frequency based
That's
too.
right. That's
And
right.
so it was a kind of system that what it did, the way it worked is it um, instead of using like focusing on the voice as a recognition system, it focused on the ear as a recognition
Oh,
system.
explain that a little bit.
Okay, well, it was based on this work that happened by these fellows named Licklider and Pollack. They were had been in the World War II, and they used these tactical radios in World War II. And when they turn up like you'd have to turn the volume up all the way to hear stuff like over all the battlefield or whatever, all the
Right.
war of noise, the noise of war rather. And so they noticed even when the radios were turned up all the way, and so it was like completely distorted. Like there was no data other than the zero crossing data. So just the essential vibrational component data of the voice without any amplitude information. So it's like basically digitized into zeros and ones at the stream that, I mean, so it's like hyper compressed
Mm-hmm.
the data because it's just 0 and 1 data at at so whenever the wave went above zero, it was clipped, and then whenever it
Uh-huh.
went below zero, it was clipped.
Right,
So
right.
so it's almost no, I mean, ridiculously reduced data form, and it turned out to be highly intelligible. And
Hmm.
so what it meant is that the manner in which we're hearing the information is we're encoding it on the basis of like it's frequency information really
Right.
about when it comes to the words. And it's not the amplitude of it actually really at all. It's like all about basically the frequency of what's happening. And so the whole thing was, and then so it was based on that idea. So what I did is I took the speech as it was coming in, I just clipped it. So I got rid of all the amplitude data. And so it was just like whenever the speech waveform crossed zero, I would make it, if it went below zero, it was zero. And if it went above zero, it was a one. And so it's highly
Ah,
reduced data. And so you could store it you could store templates or record it into memory because memory was expensive back then, and
that's
so
right.
you didn't need a lot of memory to store a word
Mm-hmm.
in this form, uh, and then the other thing it included was this quality of when you hear loud noises or as the noises get louder and louder, um, there's an automatic gain control system in the ear. And so what happens is
Okay.
that it kind of relaxes the muscles that hold the ossicles, the bones that transfer the sound from the tympanic membrane into the round window of the cochlea, the where it and so uh, there's muscle, there's little bones in there that connect the tympanic membrane because it's going from air at the tympanic
Yes. Yeah.
membrane, and inside the cochlea, it's like water. It's cerebral spinal fluid actually is what's in there, and and then so then I learned all this about, and this work started when I was in at undergraduate because my first was kind of I started learning about it. That I mean that one was modeled. It was like a different approach, but I the studying the air was part of it, and so I basically in both projects I quote like Helmholtz was like kind of a person I was referencing, and he was like 1740 or
Right.
something, and so he dissected the ear and so he laid it all out, like he unfolded the cochlea and he pulled out you could lay it all down and it looked like a keyboard, like a piano, and
Incredible.
and so
Incredible.
it's chords. It's like little they call them chords actually inside the cochlea, and so they're just strung out. And there's little short ones here, and it's all wrapped up into a snail kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's short ones here, and then it's long ones here and short ones way at the end. And so then the fluid, the cerebral spinal fluid, is being pushed back and forth
Yeah. Yeah.
um, across it by the round window that's coming from the tympanic membrane, and to induce these vibrations over the that go wrap all the way around the chords, and so you kind of vibrate them on both levels. And then the one that's in resonance with the water flow or the movement of the vibrations of the water, that's the one that's most active, the chord that's most active. And then it's got these little tiny hair cells on it
That's right.
that are a little bit like the cones and rods in the eye, like it's
Mm-hmm.
almost the same cellular structures. And then those are the things that actually transduce the vibrational because they're standing on the cord and they're like fixed in the water and then they're activated and then they modulate the flow of current that then goes into the eighth nerve into the brain. And so
This all happens in an incredible amount of speed that we
yeah,
can
yeah,
even. It's just
super fast.
amazing, really. To
Yeah.
me, it's like a wonder. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Uh, so
But
anyway,
that's so at the very beginning, you were already getting into the physicality and the embodiment of how hearing and how listening happens, right? And the
yeah, kind of early, like
vibrational early on. Yeah.
yeah, before I turned 20, kind of started learning a little bit about that. And then um, then I had like a kind of a detour, and so I became sort of concerned with the success of this company, and so
Hmm.
I kind of put a lot of stuff, and I didn't been doing a lot of artwork and stuff. Like I did a lot of stained glass and uh, bronze casting, and
Hmm.
but I kind of put a lot of that stuff aside, and I got into like I became like a administrator, I was kind of CEO of this company for.
So did you envision this company? Did you
I,
create it? It
I
was
was one
your
of the
idea?
I was
You
one
were,
of the founders.
okay.
There were like four of us. That's
And the idea behind the company, can you describe to us?
it was this strip chart recorder idea
Right. Yeah.
that I learned about
Yeah.
at Atascadero State Hospital, but converted so it became operational on the Macintosh computer.
So you basically moved it into the digital era, right?
Hmm. And then you could modem your data to Europe, you know.
Wow, and that was so ahead of its time. When was this? Early 80s or when was
Hmm.
this?
Yeah, early 80s, exactly. And
Amazing.
so yeah, and so I did that for like 18 years. And then from like 1990,
And it was continuously the same technology that was just getting upgraded, or did you expand into other?
it became a kind of chasing platform problem where you had
Aha,
all these computational frameworks,
right.
and so all these variations on a theme that were in every single platform, you had to address it, and it was a different framework, kind of like, so was Windows 95 and NT and
Right.
XT and all these crazy, like, I don't know, at one point we're and then we kind of finally halted all that by developing on a cross-platform system that they
Hmm.
just port to whatever. You design one code, and then you port to whatever platform.
And mostly for medical use, or what was the
No,
proof?
all
No,
academics,
all
everything.
academic.
Yeah, it
For
was strictly.
instance,
Mhm. Anybody who is interested in any aspect of the human body in an academic framework that wanted to go like deeper.
like
And
for instance, give us an example.
well, the kind of, there were the very super direct ones, like people that were like physiologists, and so they wanted to know like the strength of a contraction, or how did these two contractions relate to one another, and
Hmm.
so like variation, like other, and it would spin off into things like exercise physiology or
Hmm.
sports medicine or pulmonary function or cardiovascular hemodynamics or neurophysiology. Uh, and then it started branching. Then it started like stuff like neuroeconomics
Hmm.
and programs that.
That's the
Uh,
90s, I think.
mhm.
Neuroeconomics, yeah.
Yeah, kind of this idea that that economics is more about supply and demand. Like there's
Hmm.
hurting stuff, and then there's like things are like coveted, and then you develop attachments to them. Kind of
Right,
stuff
right.
like that. And then increasingly, I think at first we were very general purpose, like whoever wanted to study physiology under any circumstance. But more and more we got pulled into psychophysiology, and and um, and it was just clear that there was a kind of mind body thing that was going on, and that just was the lay of the land. Like we kept hearing it. It kept like, there was, it's, and increasingly thinking about these things, even though the people that were purchasing them had they were like in cardiology research or pulmonary research, or and not necessarily systemic. From our point of view, it was super systemic. And so it was just increasingly was clear that it was a kind of network. The body was a network, and it was all chatty. I mean, it's so obvious, completely obvious, like it should be like, but it kind of, I mean, it was very siloed. Like it was just like you
Right.
were a cardiologist, and so you just didn't think much about that, what was going on beyond that, really. Sometimes you did, but mostly it was like,
It's still that way to a large degree
mhm.
in
Yeah, it still is.
academia for sure.
In 2016, though, there was a new development that was kind of like physiology had been the same my entire career. It had always been kind of the same. And then in 2016, there was a bit of a shift, and it started in Italy, uh, it was this idea of network physiology. And
Huh.
so it's all about they've completely abandoned all the particulars about like it's all about like
Cool.
higher level constructs about how systems behave with each other in the body. So kind of the
Amazing.
interactions. Yeah. And so it's
And
kind of
was it overlapping with Eastern views of the body? Uh, if you're looking at Chinese medicine or
no, and I
Ayurveda,
mean, not at least
no?
not on the surface or not on the face. The
Right,
very
right.
different terminology is used,
Sure, sure.
and when we would go to shows and exhibitions in Asia, there was
Hmm.
always a what they would call a traditional medicine portion, and then there would be
Yes.
like the what more that would be conventional Western, like,
Right, right,
and
right.
so it was almost like two conferences,
Uh-huh.
and so it was fascinating. I always like to hang out and sort of see what like they'd see kids like doing using lasers with acupressure or acupuncture and stuff. So it was yeah, kind of broad. Yeah, it was interesting. Well, that was also pretty eye-opening too, and like I remember this one time, it was specifically an Asian, a fellow in China, a group actually, a whole group of people in Shanghai, and they were doing work on the pulse,
Uh-huh.
and so they wanted a very, very clear representation of what the pulse waveform was.
Hmm.
And so, because it's um, as I learned, it was a very big deal to be able to be a practitioner would have very sensitive
Sure,
fingers and
sure.
would be able to see, oh, there's a kind of, there's a lack of something, or
Right, right, right.
maybe need more metal, or, um, but you could determine things by looking, and and so that so it was then it was like specialized equipment that would be have wider bandwidths that would allow better characterization of these things and try to preserve the fidelity of the signal all the way through to the point where it was could be visualized and then reinterpreted or whatever. And so anyway, yeah, and then in 2008, I quit that job being president, and then
Being
I
the job of being president.
yeah, settle, and then but there was somebody else that wanted it, so it was great, good timing, and then I went on a number of these. I went on a number of like kind of art residency experiences, and so and I really appreciated the one at STIME. It was a Center for Electronic Music in Amsterdam,
Oh,
and I was
nice.
just there briefly, but enough to really kind of get a sense of just kind of like sort of starting to think again about like music and the
Right.
creation of it, and so then yeah, I started working on art projects that were kind of like portals, I guess, and they were technical aids or technical strategies that were and I don't know if I would did certainly wasn't thinking about them as portals originally, but now that's how I think about them. And they were like connections between like our familiar conscious layer and the supporting conscious layer. Like, and I would say that would be the organ system or autonomic layer. And like, what is the name? And I knew people that I kind of started learning about certain kinds of things like the Batdorf method and Feldenkrais and body mind
Hmm.
centering and realized these were also strategies that were
So,
portals. They were
I'm
like,
sorry to interrupt, but so you were learning about all these methods after you stopped working with the company or
"Mhm.
during the, oh, that's
No,
funny.
no, I learned about those things more afterwards.
Interesting.
I
So
mean, I was
you're
exposed to Feldenkrais earlier, but I didn't really think about it until
right, right, right.
later. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so then it was like, oh, these individuals are like really good at interoceptively mining, like learning, like understanding what their body is doing,
Hmm.
and then also in terms of like how that might result in like behavioral changes and or feelings or emotional expressions or relating to other people or whatever it was, and so uh, it just became kind of a focus for me. So this idea of like bringing aspects of the autonomic nervous system more forward and using biomedical engineering techniques to do that. And so one of the first projects I worked on was it was called the heartbeat amplifier, and it was like a chair that you sit in that you put your hands on these like uh, inverted Tibetan prayer bowls that were connected to specialized equipment that would measure the very minute signals that were generated from left arm to right arm each time the heart beats. And so it didn't require any electrodes to work. You could just sit in a chair and be comfortable. And the consequence of sitting in the chair was very helpful because you were quite relaxed
Right.
in the chair. And then that removed a lot of stress or tension that you would normally carry if you were upright or held your hands upwards or something.
Mhm.
And so your body was quiet then. And so your heart became extremely clear. And so you could
And so
amplify.
the Tibetan bowls were resonating or
Oh no, they were metal and they were also silver coated. And
uh-huh.
so they would develop a natural layer of silver chloride, which was very amenable. It's an extremely good way to touch the body and to get information off of it.
I
And
see.
so the Tibetan prayer bowls were also I turned them upside down so they were they would fit like in your hand when it was just
I see.
loosely
So
there
you're kind of
because
holding.
they're a little bit spherical upside
Uh-huh.
down. And
Sure.
so you just rest your hand and you make extremely good contact, and it's a low impedance, low noise electrode connections, high quality
Very
signal.
cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just stumbled across that one. So um and so but it was just very it was so it wasn't really like a medical device, like, so it was a kind of chair and you had a comfortable place to rest your hands and that was it. And then you would have this feeling because it I was presenting the signal back to you and then it was being delivered through your back, and there was like haptic transducer there because most of the energy from the heart is below human hearing. And so you needed to be able to kind of physically move something versus make a sound. And I didn't want to translate it at all. Like I didn't want to turn it into like like turn the heartbeat into a sound or like the actual visceral, like just the straight amplification of it uh, in a very direct, super direct way, like as clear of just make it as clear as possible. And then this thing it kind of it became a little bit popular, and so it started there made multiple ones, and it went to the exploratorium for a little while for like an event and the California Academy of the Sciences, and then it was on the festival circuit, and all of it exhausting, for us. And
When was that? What years?
first started thinking about that in 2009,
Hmm.
and then um I had this increasing connection to UCSB that was evolving,
Hmm.
and so I started learning a little bit more about psychophysiology research, and then I became affiliated with this lab at first very indirectly called the Meta Lab. It's a memory, emotion, thought awareness laboratory.
And who was leading that?
A fellow by the name of Jonathan Schooler,
Hmm. Is he
and
still there?
yeah, he's become a good friend, and so I'm kind of experimentalist there. Like I work on different research projects and engaged with the lab in a kind of an experimentalist capacity.
Nice.
And then it's not a paid gig or anything like
Yeah.
that. And so, uh,
Access to the lab, man. That's all that counts.
yeah, it's really fun. I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And Jonathan introduced me to these, kind of consciousness theories that were, and I started learning about that community, what they were into, and how they were starting to think about it, and it connected with me in terms of I guess a little bit like, I mean, from the very first, like I remember being really young and seeing on the TV, like, these people like in white lab coats and they're back in the black and white TV, but they're holding up like the Erlenmeyer flask and they're hitting it with like lightning. And then they're saying, oh my God, when we hit it with lightning and we have these compounds in there, we make like amino acids. And so it was a kind of way of describing like how life would start,
Right.
and like why and these questions were important to us as a family. I mean, my mom was super Catholic, and um but also we're all getting good educations, and so kind of learning about like kind of secular viewpoints and non-secular, and so it was interesting, the subject of like, well, why is it, kind of why are we here and all that. Um and one of the things about the Erlenmeyer flasks and the making of life is that you start to think a little bit more. And I was into chemistry when I was in high school. I was way into chemistry, and so I learned the periodic table really well, and I learned about electron orbitals, and so I knew there were roughly 100 elements and now more, and then learned like about hydrocarbons, and and then I was also increasingly clear, of course, you learn about the Big Bang, and then you learn about the fact that, our universe, for whatever weird reason, is tuned. At the moment of the Big Bang, it had they called them Gauss numbers, I guess, and it's the ratios between the proton and the electron and the neutron, like somehow get weirdly established at the moment of the Big Bang. I don't know how or why, but for whatever reason, mysterious forces are present, and that it causes the ratios of these things. And now physicists have determined these ratios to like 30 significant digits or something, and no one knows why. It's a complete mystery why these ratios are the way they are, but these ratios give rise to the periodic table as we understand it. And so when you have the ratios of the masses this way, you develop things like carbon and hydrogen and oxygen, and then also the scaffolding qualities of carbon because of the way the electron orbitals work and the manner in which carbon can create lattices. And then when you start to look at the hydrocarbon situation, you see, oh, it's like kind of building blocks. And then you see, oh, well, the building blocks are so pervasive and so profound that you can do the craziest things, like just take random stuff and put it in an Erlenmeyer flask and hit it with electricity, and you get these like complex molecules. And then it was actually much later. Uh, you kind of learning like, oh, the geologic actually impresses itself along the biologic, because the basalt lava like orients proteic acids to become like RNA, or that kind of stuff. So it's a, sort of weirdly set up so that the universe is uh, like creates these systems that allow a kind of complex system, like the universe is basically entropic, or it's just increasing entropy, and then the life is like anti-entropic, and so it's like about organization, increasing, and then if I think about the body, like I think about our familiar consciousness, and then the supporting layer of our organ system layer, and then the supporting system there, like the cellular layer that supports each organ system, and then the organelle layer that's the cells that support the organ systems, and then the organelles that support the cells. Many layers of uh, of of a kind of communication, or kind of like uh, how would I say it? Um, like layers of awareness, I guess. And so and each one is a kind of language, that's affiliated with it. Like I would describe the organ system language as like a language of loosely coupled stacked chaotic oscillators kind of language. It's a language of rhythm, kind of, and
The language of rhythm.
a language of rhythm. Yeah. And
Exactly.
then, and so then back to music is that music is um, really interesting because it's kind of like kind of a portal. It's like a uh, works within portals, I guess, because it speaks to like um, at least two layers really well, like our familiar consciousness and also our rhythm layer, just evidenced by like the advent of disco, or I mean, and then also become increasingly clear with the advent of the bass speaker. Then you start to feel it in and then it becomes a kind of another, and signal and noise does matter. And so
Mm-hmm,
it's
mm-hmm.
sort of like yeah, you kind of like start putting energy in band to physiology, like physiological frequencies, which basically range. The sweet spot is like 3 cycles per minute to like 7 cycles per second. In that range of like when you have periodicities that are introduced to the body, it just pulls that energy in and it figures out what to do with it. But it doesn't ignore it because it's in band. And so,
So does this lead you to create the kind of vibration uh, bed or the
mhm.
chairs that you
Yeah,
created?
yeah,
Because that was
Shipway.
a pretty intense experience. I was really intrigued actually, because I know a lot went into it. And it's not the same like your massage chairs, or
Mm-mm.
it felt very much like a complex system.
Hmm.
Uh, a lot of your experiences and what you've been talking about went into that project.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah.
so talk about that a little bit, like because I think that took a lot of development too. I don't think it was a simple task to develop and produce and get people to
Hmm.
actually use them.
Hmm.
What are they called? Do you have a name
Well,
for them?
it started, its first name was the Meba, MEBA, and
Uh-huh.
it wasn't a chair, it was like a vest.
Oh, interesting. And
Yeah, it
what
was
does
that
the MABA stand for?
it was somebody had put it on,
Uh-huh.
and a fellow who's a good friend, and he said he put it on, and then we read him through. He goes, "I feel just like an amoeba." So he said, "Oh,
Okay, that's what it is.
yeah, that's how it started."
So it
Yeah,
was first
amoeba.
a vest. You first had
Hmm.
it as a vest.
Yeah, first was a vest, yeah. But it proved to be like really complicated because it was hard to size, and there was a whole like how do you keep it clean and all kinds of problems. I mean, it's very cool, and I think maybe at some point we'll return to that because
You still have the vest?
mhm, yeah, I still
Great.
do. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, there's a number of them. Uh and then this idea of like, well, if you could expand it, like, because we knew that we were talking to the mechanoreceptors. And so,
Wait,
uh,
but backtrack a little bit. So the
mhm,
vest was conceived to do what? Like, what was the point of it? Like, if I put it on,
mhm.
what was it? What was your goal with it?
It was a kind of, it was developed without any kind of financial thought.
Not
Like,
financial, just like what
yeah,
was
yeah,
the
right. So
purpose?
the impulse, it was kind of, the heartbeat amplifier was already existing then.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
this kind of idea of the haptic representation of like talking to the body in sort of a haptic way,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was also a floor that was put in at SBcast that was a tactile flooring that was based on these transducers that were made by a guy named Randy Croson, who's just down the street from us at Bio, from at SBcast. And then also at the same time, BIOPAC was doing work with a virtual reality company called WorldViz. And then we were working on simulations that would be used for like fear of heights and things like that. And one of them was an elevator simulation, and we used haptic transducers to convey that. And it was absolutely amazing when you used haptic transducers with a VR, the like a fear of heights demo, it became fabulously compelling. Like it was a whole nother layer of
Wait, I think I experienced that at Santa Barbara. Wasn't there a psychologist that had a lab that was doing something like
Mhm.
this?
Yeah. There was yeah, UCSB psychology. There was a whole VR group, and
Yes,
WorldViz grew out of that group.
I believe it. I remember, 'cause I can't remember the name of the
Yeah, Andy
professors.
Beal was one of them, and um, I'll think of some other names.
Yeah, I tested it, and I have to
Jim
say,
Blaskovich, I
I
think.
was so scared. Like, you're
Oh,
you're
yeah.
supposed to fall,
Oh, that was the
and
pit demo probably. Like walking.
probably, and
Yeah.
I kept saying to myself, it's only VR, stop it.
Hmm.
Like, why is it's like there's an inherent kind of response to
Hmm. Yeah, it's quite
these
a hack,
systems.
like
Yeah,
really,
amazing.
it is amazing. And
Yeah.
but so it kind of had this sort of new about haptics, like that they had a kind of special way. Like if
Yeah.
you modulated them properly, they could talk to the body in a very particular way.
So you put it on and the it is recording your body rhythms,
No,
or
we
what
didn't
is it
make it.
doing?
We
What
didn't
is it
make it so
doing?
it recorded, but we made it so you could uh, you could feed we could introduce certain signals into it. And
Like what? Like what
well,
would you?
like we started with things like sine waves, and so you could introduce a sine wave into it that would modulate the energy that was being delivered to that part of the body.
So it was a healing? It would heal or
Uh,
relax?
yeah,
What
it wasn't.
was
I guess it was just the kind of the curiosity of it, and more of a exploration of just how the haptics felt when you were
mhm,
doing this, and you brought them close into the body.
mhm.
And so it was a kind of just, I
So
don't know,
it was
curiosity.
experimenting, yeah.
It's
Okay.
totally just experimenting. Yeah.
And then that developed further into the chair.
Hmm. Yes, that developed further into the chair, and then there was this, um, kind of connecting it to just all the details associated with that, like when you pull it closer into the chair, and so how you decide to marry it to the audio track, and um,
So
but then
there's
we
the audio track, but then there's also the vibration level, right? And the
Mhm.
vibration level gets it can get pretty intense.
Absolutely, yes, can get intense. Yeah.
So were you thinking of how it would impact the body physiologically to be experiencing that kind of level of vibration?
Well, yeah, and I guess we're trained a little bit by previous experiments, like with the haptic flooring and then with the
Yeah,
heartbeat amplifier. We were kind of aware of like when you would turn it up, there would be a kind of feeling, and then when you turn it down, there would be like a different one. And
right.
so this sort of increasing awareness about like the importance of like the level and
Mm-hmm.
and the salience of that, like when things are subtle, um, then we just respond to them differently than when their energy is more. And so
Right.
there's like thresholds, I guess, where awareness and focus starts to change.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, kind of controlling the energy seemed like it was important. And then just started stumbling. Like, so basically, just like, and we called the first things, we were embodiment vests, was like the first kind of name. And then we had a big long cable and like a control box that would introduce different signals. And then that person became like an embodiment jockey. Instead of a disc jockey, it was sort of like, oh, you're like kind of playing this out haptically on a person's torso. and then noticing that people would go through like these very, and one person we put it on broke down, they started crying. And then it became, and then we were thinking, wow, why did that happen? Like what? Because it was pleasurable. I mean, for the most part, people like it was a kind of people liked it. But then there was this increasingly obvious. I mean, it just became increasingly obvious this connection to like an emotional state, and then the nature of like what vibrational patterns would lead to this, and then it was just immediately in the lab after that. So it was like, oh, that when we do that, that's what causes this. Like then, and you start to learn that there are like the body rings at certain points, like at 6 breaths per minute, um, which is a kind of like a breathing rate for like yogic practices and stuff that has a very specific kind of effect on the body versus breathing at 15 breaths per minute, and then the manner and how you do that breathing. And so then we started using that as a clue to use the vibrational patterns to mimic systems. So we started mimicking and supporting like breathing patterns. And so the first journeys were all about breathing journeys. Like, so they were coupled, like we would start vibrational patternings that were in band, and then we would instruct people to follow them with your breath. And then we would record physiological signals that were associated with that, like, uh, like, and then in particular, like what would like we looked at the heart and respiratory effort relationship and how that, how those were coupled, kind of joined at the hip really. And then, um, just became increasingly aware of like all the parts of the body that are associated with cross frequency coupling and network and then the network physiology relationship and how you can introduce. And then we started realizing that you didn't even need to include like breathing was it's always interesting and helpful if you're focused to that to include breathing. I mean, it's just part of the process, but it became something where the body would respond to the vibratory patterning independent of the breath. And so you could start modulating the vasculature and then we started learning about the release of nitric oxide and how the mechanoreceptors would cause that and thus modulate the vasculature. And then we had some reports of like people using these systems with like in in like places that do intravenous like give you an intravenous bag like a saline bag or whatever, and then you would uh, like you just would pull it in a lot faster, like under these vibratory patternings, because you were modulating the vasculature. So you're like almost pumping the body.
Interesting. Wow.
And then we kind of learned how to do cerebral spinal fluid measurements and then started seeing the effect of the of the vibrational patterning on the manner and how the cerebral spinal fluid moves. And and then we're uh, we could we kind of had a full physiology lab, psychophysiology lab, so we could kind of look at anything. So we, ways to monitor respiration, electrocardiogram, cerebral spinal fluid, and then also brain waves, and then doing functional near infrared imaging. So start to see like these like layers, connected layers that were all coupled back to these vibrational patternings of specific frequency.
Where was the lab?
It was at SBcast.
And who was working with you? Had a team or?
Well, no, it was kind of that was sort of my court. I mean, because that was really it was all BIOPAC equipment and
Right.
and so it was like it was like kind of a and I'm very familiar with that equipment
Yeah.
line because I designed all the front ends.
Right. Wow.
So it just and I'd done a lot of physiology measurements historically. So it's a little bit
Yeah.
like riding a bicycle, that stuff. But then seeing
Incredible. So all the whole path of what you said was like a diversion. It wasn't. It was really just having to learn all that and have the experience that then you brought right back into it, and
Yeah, it
connecting
kind of
the.
started it really closed the loop. And
Hmm.
Shiftwave was so
Hmm.
interesting of a because BioPAC was really concerned with measurement. It wasn't
Right,
really concerned with I mean, it had some stimulus stuff, but it was more
right.
like nerve conduction velocity but nothing that would talk to the body like in a rhythm way. And that's what Shiftwave was a communicator, and it's a communication modality, I guess. Um, and but we started realizing it was not really that nothing really that new, actually a little bit new, but then started saying, oh, I mean, anytime you talk to a somatic practitioner or anybody who's like into massage or certain kinds of massage,
They go, yeah, we know that.
yeah, they totally like, they've known it forever, and so it was, and they would also report, of course, people, like you'd have emotional releases on the massage table, and then it started pulling me closer into these other areas, somatic practices, like that were all designed to be, to develop out interoceptive abilities, and then, but also cue you in, by that, with the same token, it's like what kind of strategies can you employ that don't require really any external vibratory patterning or
Uh-huh.
whatever that can allow you to do similar things. What's interesting with the shift waves, it's very easy. Like you don't have to know anything. You don't need any discipline or anything to move forward
Oh,
with it. So it's convenient, but I guess there's a lot of ways to get there.
so you said that people were using these chairs, they're distributed in places. I think that you told me this, or
Pardon? Um,
these chairs, the vibration
mhm,
chairs, are people using them, or?
mhm. Yeah, there's about 3,000 floating around the world.
You're kidding.
Mhm.
Amazing.
No, they're made here in Santa Barbara, and or they were. Now they're transferring elsewhere. But
So what are they called? The
it's
chairs?
shift wave.
Shift wave.
Yeah.
And they're used mostly by what kind of
Well, they
people?
they they found multiple homes. There's it's kind of like this whole like wellness clinic.
Yeah.
Like they're super into that. They like them, and and then there's p professional uh, sports players
Oh,
like them,
interesting.
and so there's
Because
there.
it gives them energy or it
It's
kind
a
of
kind of
resets them. Like why would a sportsman be interested in that?
it 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 what at I guess at these kind of rarefied or whatever at this level, like there um when you're good enough, like, so, like, you remember like back in like I kind of, when I tell the story, it's a little bit like remembering tennis from like a long time ago, there were there was a player, Michael Chen, I think, and so he was like a really good tennis player, but he was like rarely first, but like almost second or third, like almost all the time. I mean, it's always competitive, and you always had to beat him on your way to becoming first, but he was rarely at first. And so there was kind of the top sports, and I learned this a little bit at BioPAC, and then there was a fellow in Italy named Amadeo who also really drilled this home for me. But it's a kind of storytelling that happens at the highest level of sports. Like it's more like, what story are you making in your head that determines how you're going to perform? Like,
That's so interesting.
and so
Yeah.
it was more about how do you change the story? Because everyone's so good, like they're all really good. They're all really
Yeah.
good. And so it's the level, the difference level is more about like that.
Which is
It
back to when you started your internship, right? It was all about
The
storytelling, kind of
storytelling,
thing.
yeah. And so the shift wave, or and I think a lot of there's plenty of somatic experiences that are like that too, but the shift wave, and this is where the psychophysiology part became really interesting, because I learned a little bit about brain function. These three parts of the brain, the default mode network and the central executive and the salience network. And the default mode would be the one like that's associated with like mind wandering or storytelling
Mhm.
and like modeling the world. And then the central executive is the one that's really about like what's going on now. And and so like directed activity.
Mhm.
And then salience is a kind of chooser, and it's determining which is more important. Is the story more important, or is what's happening now more important? And then it organizes the body to be in support of that. And this is my
Uh-huh.
simple, super crude
Yeah, yeah.
breakdown. And what the shift wave does really well, which you could do it in plenty of ways, like a cold plunge, I think probably works well too. But is that it the entire sensory net of the eyes and the ears and all the senses feed into the central executive network first. And so when the senses are stimulated a lot, the central executive network gets activated, and then it's an antagonist to default mode. And so whatever storytelling you're doing is kind of uh, debil it's kind of destabilized.
Uh-huh.
And so it doesn't hold as much water, I guess, the story, like when you're stimulating the central
Makes
executive
sense.
network. And that was connected with me, like when, if I ever do, like I haven't done a cold plunge a lot, but what I have, it's like I can't hold on to a single thought other than, oh my God, it's super
Exactly.
cold. So that made sense to me that it's like that. And
So it's very related to meditation practices where you're
yeah.
basically
Hmm.
watching your thoughts, or it's not even about stopping it, but just not getting attached to the stories that are being told, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think meditation is very much about like this idea of the right, you watch the story, but it's not like you just see it come and go, I guess. And
Yes.
then it's that perfect thing in meditation where you kind of if you stop thinking or maybe when you're getting started, like when you think about your breath, and then when you're not thinking about your breath, start thinking about your breath.
Right.
You know,
So tell me a little bit about the project, the Plume Cathedra project that's right behind me.
okay, yeah. So this was that when I start the heartbeat amplifier was first, and
Yeah.
then I wanted to make a chair that was about breathing, and then um, I this thing about the wings is interesting because like birds, they
Mhm.
the way they breathe is that they have to flap their wings. Like that's how they
Interesting.
like when they flap, they breathe and flying. And breathing and staying aloft in a gravitational field are totally coupled ideas in birds. All birds that fly, they're like this. And so the Plume Cathedra was a kind of biological mimic because
Mm.
it's sensitive to changes in center of gravity. And then by virtue of those changes, it flaps the wings. And then it just so happens that when you breathe, you shift your center of gravity. And so the first one was totally red chair, like red
Mhm.
wings and red chair. And then there was an artist who was organizing an exhibition here at Lotus Land in Santa Barbara. And she said, love you to bring your chair, but we really want it in white. So, so yeah, that's how
So
that
you
happened.
accommodated.
Yeah, I kind of made it in white.
Why
So,
did you want it to be red in the first place?
well, because the blood, it's about,
The
you know,
blood.
yeah.
Yeah, it always comes back to the breath, doesn't it?
Mm. And then there was going to be a bunch of chairs, like, but I never really finished. There was one, they were all in various stages of prototype. Like one was about the eyes. And so
Uh-huh.
you look with this eye, and then
Hmm.
there's this whole system where it you can look through this sort of camera system, and then it comes back and the camera system is looking at this eye.
Oh,
And then you
wow.
can use this eye to see deep into that eye, like
Oh, wow.
see the whole retina and the whole like deep way, like right into the thing.
That's insane. Are you gonna do it?
I think I'd like
It's a
to
great idea. It's crazy.
see use one eye to see into the other, and then one was going to be on the muscles, and
Hmm.
one of the things that are cool about interesting. So I'm working with muscles a lot actually in my work. Kind of, yeah, just one that's not going away. And
Yeah, muscles and vibration and
well, and
repetition.
so I've learned about the different kinds of muscles, like smooth muscle and cardiac muscle and striated muscle. And I was told that all striated muscle is voluntary, but then I learned that that's not true.
Uh-huh.
That's striated muscle, meaning that you're deciding whether or not to move it. And but there are plenty of muscles that are striated that like gravity muscles. And
Mhm.
so these would be muscles that are striated, but they're holding you aloft in a gravitational field, and that you don't think about them, and they're like local activate, like they have like local intelligence that allows them to be, say, stimulated or not. Um, there's some, I don't know, some like even brain down there or something at these. So so anyway, the muscle chair was one where you sit in and all these things you sit in, and which is very helpful for physiology because when you're sitting, you're quiet. And a big problem with physiology measurements is that they're so tiny, like the signals are, millionths of a volt, and so the slightest little perturbation, like results in like artifact, and even like an electrode put on the skin when you touch it just briefly, it has like what's called electrode because it's a gel layer, like it's a metal and then a gel layer and then the
Mhm.
skin, and so it's dissimilar materials, and that creates like a potential. And so they're like little, even the electrodes are like little batteries. When you touch them, they make signals that are in
Mhm.
band. And so motion artifacts, so that's why all these things are based on chairs. And particularly papasan chairs, which are like the chair you grew up with when you had your psychedelic experiences in college, you know.
That's why you have all this. So I see the chairs are always those chairs.
Yeah, they're papasan chairs. Yeah, exactly. Super comfortable, you know. Yeah, super comfortable chairs. And then so the muscle one, the muscles sound like the ocean. And so when you amplify the signal, it's like waves crashing.
Oh, wow.
And so
Beautiful.
I thought it would be cool to like bring that forward, like have
Hmm.
like what kind of song are they singing, the muscles,
Mm.
And so that like recently I'm working on this project. It's like a government thing, like a grant thing, and it's a system that measures the muscles, and it's the muscles' relationship to anesthesia. And
Oh,
when you're doing operations on someone, like
sure.
you want to give them enough anesthesia, but not too much. And then if you measure the muscles, even when you're totally relaxed, like could not be more relaxed, the muscles are all vibrating. They vibrate
Mm.
just a little tiny amount, and they vibrate at a kind of characteristic rate, and which is like roughly for in that range of vocal cords, like in that 100 hertz to 200 hertz range, they kind of vibrate in that range, and when you apply anesthesia, they stop vibrating that range,
Mm.
and so
Interesting.
by monitoring the muscle, you can see, oh, the muscle is no longer doing that vibration. And therefore, that means the motor neurons are anesthetized. And because the neurons, I don't know, they think efferent neurons are kind of like afferent neurons. And so they think, oh, sensory nerves must also then be anesthetized. And so you can like measure these muscles, and you can kind of like meter anesthesia super well without you don't need to poke them and ask them, do you feel that or whatever.
Fantastic. And it really is, it talks to also how fast muscles can atrophy if if you don't move and you have anesthesia and you stay in place.
Hmm.
That explains it actually, that it's a constant vibration, kind of
Hmm.
a nano vibration, right?
Yeah, nano vibration. So anyway, back to vibration matters. It's so I've come to after all this. Well, I don't know. I'm 67 years old now, and it's abundantly clear to me that that vibration is at the from the moment of the Big Bang to the manifestation of physiology on the planet and the nature of these uh, systems that are all perceiving the universe in their own weird, strange way. And it's the simultaneous unfolding of these things that give rise to the conscious experience, I think. And but at every layer, the vibrational patterning that is happening is the core, is kind of the core principle. And and certainly when it comes to just autonomic physiology, that's the basic operational framework is a language of rhythm, and the network physiologists are also got this message loud and clear. And so yeah, anyway, so yeah, I think that is
It's so beautiful. I really appreciate hearing the richness of your search and how you navigate these worlds, but at the heart, you are looking for rhythm and you're experimentalist and you're just going into it deeply, working with labs and true art science, really, what you're working with. And the projects are just so marvelous. I really appreciate it.
but the guiding principle though is and when you brought it up the other day, over lunch, the vibration matters. It's a very close to my heart. I love that is a kind of very much focal point of the work.
Completely,
And
completely.
yeah, just uh, well, in right back to the yin and yang, that the basic Chinese,
Yes.
super simple, like the polarity creates a fiducial,
Mhm.
and the fiducial, you can start leaning against the fiducial to create structures.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and 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 so all these vibrational patternings, that like the earth going on its axis or the earth going around the sun, all these like vibrational systems become, and they're very high Q, so very, very stable. And so like life clings to that. And because
Mhm.
it then starts modulating the energy flow. But the fiducial is first, like it's a kind of structural element. The vibration is a structural element that things attach to, like the coral reef.
Yeah, and there's a lot of destructive vibration happening. That's
Yeah, kind of on
really
both, right? It's that whole kind of like range of things. Yeah.
it's really intense and very complex right now. So it must be some kind of shift that we're in that's also on many different levels, but it's a lot of destructive noise happening right now. So the kind of work you're doing is really important, and you have the tools. I mean, you really are able to engineer new devices and to connect the philosophical and the aesthetic and the experiential areas, and also connect to government and industry. It's very cool. I really appreciate the complexity of what you do.
Oh,
Thank
well, thank you, Victoria. I appreciate chatting about it. And
well, thank you so much. I
no,
appreciate you
thank
taking
you.
the time,
Thank you, Victoria.
sharing the
Really.
vibration
All right. Yeah.
across the land. I really appreciate it.
Great. Lovely. Well, I'm very glad our paths crossed, Victoria. Thank you very
Yes,
much. I'm look forward to the next opportunity to do, what it is we're going to do. So,
exactly. We're going to sit
okay.
on some chairs and vibrate.
That's right.
All right, take
Great.
care.
Thank
Give
you.
me your
Bye-bye, Victoria.
hands. Bye.